Welcome to yet another edition of the Citizens Community Forum. I'm Stephen Cummings, and our objective is always to have an engaging, interactive, and civil discourse, and in so doing, help develop a culture of peace and understanding through constructive dialogue and, yes, citizens' participation. Our topics are wide-ranging, covering community, social, and national issues. And our guests are persons who express views and opinions of their own, and in context, views which may not necessarily be that of the FBN network, the Citizens Community Forum, or that of the host. And while there might be a divergence of views and perspectives, and a discussion at times might be emotionally charged, I believe that we can still find room for understanding and to find common ground. Now, on Saturday 26th, we heard of further measures announced by government aimed at creating greater levels of relaxation from the COVID-19 restrictions, and the further opening up of the economy is supposed to allow for more economic activity. This may come as good news for some, but others may see it as cause for concern, in that it also means greater levels of threats to society, both within and external, by some who basically live for a life of crime. This evening, inside the Citizens Community Forum, our topic, border security, creating a framework for a safe Trinidad and Tobago. Joining me this evening is Mr. Garvin Hira, former head of the National Operations Center, NOC, Trinidad and Tobago, and the Homeland Security and Safe City expert. Someone who has had responsibilities to treat with combating maritime anti-terrorism activities, the human trafficking, the drug trade, and arms smuggling in the region. Mr. Hira, welcome again to the Citizens Community Forum.
Me, and a very pleasant evening to the team in studio and to those who are joining us and streaming online. Thank you very much, and it is indeed a privilege to be part of this conversation.
Yes, thank you again, Mr. Hira. Mr. Hira, we began this conversation some months ago, and we are back at this place again. And if we are honest, and can we say that Trinidad and Tobago continues to be not a completely safe place when it comes to crime and criminality as peaceful? I say this because it was only last week, Acting Police Commissioner McDonald Jacobs lamented that what appears to be more worrying signs of the fermentation of criminal gangs and the continued proliferation of illegal high-powered weapons, being seized, taken off the streets in various divisional districts across the country. There was even the reorganization, even prior to that, of an existing enforcement team, now known as, I suppose one of the new task force operational teams. Are we losing or have we lost the battle? What are your views, Mr. Hira, as we begin the discussion? We're talking about border security.
As a strategic security expert, one tends to hold on to the reins of optimism. And therefore, even if for some reason there seems to be an issue in the environment that appears to put us in a sort of fear, because sometimes when a crime occurs and it is brandished over our networks, be it the print media, the social media, which is a key platform, or even at talk shops and stuff, you tend to see a semblance of fear being expressed in the citizenry. To be quite truthful, this happens ever so often, especially when you have those sort of dramatic murders, or a body is found, like for instance the kidnapped victim or the abducted victim taken from the Tucker estate, and a lot of investigations are taking place. When the body is located, a sense of fear comes in that, wait a minute, abductions and murders. The 87-year-old that was killed in the house invasion in Barrackpore, that sends a sort of message across society. Now I have to hold on to the fact that, wait a minute, yes, these things may be happening, but we have to also see what is taking place in the line of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, law enforcement, national security. Are we building enough resilience to combat some of these issues? And that is where the question tends to pivot. And I'm saying even the formation of the National Operations Task Force that you spoke about, okay, it may be a step in the right direction. The acting commissioner spoke about bringing vision and bringing structure and administration, and more so an oversight, command and control over the special unit. It will support operationally some of the other arms of national security. We saw a sort of consultative and collaborative approach with the photo op.
Yes.
The Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force will seem to be part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But what we need to see is that there's a concept of operations, that yes, units are being formed, but have we conceptualized how they are going to be implemented into the environment, how it's going to work, who's going to have the primacy, who's going to have command and control, how are we going to utilize intelligence, have we reviewed our intelligence architecture to ensure that it is strong enough and screening itself into operations so that we can be working smarter. Now, those are some issues that needs to be questioned.
Right.
So all we have formed units, although there are issues, the question comes back to us, are we feeling safe or not? When you question the citizens outside there, Citizen X in the streets, people tend to say, no, we are not feeling safer because we're hearing about the house invasions, we're hearing about the abductions, the carjackings, the robberies. We've seen people walking into broad daylight into business places and people are being robbed. So there's an issue of fear, and that fear has continued to make people believe, you know what, I don't think I'm feeling safe.
All right, and that's very, very concerning. Again, they're telling us, Mr. Hira, that guns and ammunition are among the first weapons of choice by criminals, and I wonder that in an age of high technological advancement and intelligence gathering on the landscape, it begs the question just how our defense, what is really the state of our defense in 2022, and it continues, that defense continues to be penetrated. We talk about the proliferation of high power weapons, which again is another area of very, 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 very concerning.
We have to look at this in perspective as to what we are really talking about here. Yes, there would be barrels of high powered weapons and ammunition that were intercepted at warehouses based on the import-export trade.
Yes.
Clearly, the first signal that comes up is that there seems to be criminal activity existing within the corridors of the import-export trade. What we have to also understand, Stephen and audience, is that there is a thriving trade existing outside their market with the SALW, small arms and light weapons.
Yes.
And when there's a market and there's a demand, there's going to be sale. And once there's sale, there's going to be a purchaser and a seller. There's also going to be the transactional aspect of money movement, things like this. What people have done is not so much whether we have a strong defense or not, but what these criminals have done, and this is the new word that needs to be surfaced when we examine the criminality and the environment, the word sophistication.
Yes.
We're not using that word, and I'm sharing that tonight. Sophistication. The criminal, his activities, the tradecraft, how he does business, how groups of them do business as crime groups, how they do business.
Because we're talking organized crime now, yes.
Organized crime groups, correct, has become more sophisticated. And what has happened is that this is an element, it's a trigger, it's a triple, it's a pillar of transnational organized crime. And transnational organized crime legitimizes itself as a business that utilizes criminal activity to make money. The same way that people will sit, corporate systems and state systems will sit in boardrooms and have monthly meetings in ivory towers and glass windows and large offices.
The same appears on the ground, yes.
Same thing appears in the criminal element, and it is linked. There's an alignment with that level of thinking and maximizing and legitimizing criminal activity to look like safe business.
Yes.
Pulls itself down to the streets and to the gang and to the guy who's really being used by these elements to commit crime. So what happens is that we have a structure, we have a system And we have a, I heard it recently and saw it on the headlines, a well-oiled enterprise that but is focused on criminal activity. So when we have, as you opened up, which is quite truthful, sorry, the dropping and the releasing of restrictions and stuff, and we're seeing a little more normalizing in society.
Yes.
It gives certain opportunities, for crime and criminal activity. So the same way that is happening now, what has to happen? Law enforcement has to up their game and escalate their vigilance, because people are going to look for opportunities to commit crime, and this is being controlled by crime groups. That is what you call the pattern or the footprint of transnational organized crime.
All right. So we are facing, some issues, going forward, even with the opening up of, economy. And I'll want to come back to that a little later on. But we'd just like to remind our listeners that this is the Citizens Community Forum. I'm Stephen Cummings. Our topic, border security, creating a framework for safer Trinidad and Tobago. And I have with me Mr. Garvin Hira, former head of the National Operations Center, NOC, Trinidad and Tobago, and Homeland Security, and a safe city expert. Mr. Hira, I was looking at a February 2021-2013 U.S. Congressional Research Service paper, which talked about unauthorized migrants, in the context of border security. Now, bringing it home to Trinidad and Tobago, would you say that unauthorized migrants, in that context, could be one aspect that can pose a threat to border security, and I want to just extend that. Some people believe, or may object to describing unauthorized migrants as threats to border security, because most unauthorized migrants, I suppose research can bear this out, do not intend necessarily to do harm in a country.
What we're looking at, Stephen, is the risk factor. Unauthorized migrants would mean illegal migrants, those who are choosing another portal or entrance or corridor to enter into your country. Is this a threat to border security? It is, because they are breaching your border illegally.
Right.
We have seen, based on research in other countries, and other borders may have been land borders and maritime borders, just like us, where even officials of the state are being used to transport unauthorized migrants into borders, into countries. Did that happen in Trinidad and Tobago? I am not authorized to speak on that DNA, but it would be a good area to focus on investigative journalism, or even an investigative sort of an approach to see whether or not agents of the state were also used to transport illegal or unauthorized migrants into our borders. So it's a threat to border security. Once people are reaching your border, it's a threat. Now, based on what we discussed before, human smuggling, not human trafficking, human smuggling is a business where people will pay money to come over to Trinidad and Tobago by sea transport, dropped off on remote beaches in the dead of night, being picked up by vehicles and transported to safe houses, and be given documentation that may even legalize them here in country or register them here in country, and they fit in. Again, sophistication, because it's a business. So people are being smuggled. The same way contraband is being smuggled, people are being smuggled. So human smuggling exists. I will pay X amount of money because I want to leave Venezuela. I want to leave the mainland and come over.
Yes.
What has happened based on the question of unauthorized migrants being a threat, not so much to border security, but a threat to national security?
Okay.
Because all I am concerned about as the point of contact in Simon Bolivar Square in Tucupita, I'm just drawing a dramatic reference here,
sure.
is that the individual has the money and wants to get over, and he's willing to pay. I am not interested that this individual may have made the trek all the way from Colombia or all the way from another South American country, may have had a criminal background, is fleeing law enforcement, or is fleeing for his life because what he might have been involved with. We were told in the Delta Amaracuro about the mega bandas, which is the gangs that control the urban aspects of Venezuela. So the same way the construction person is coming over, the hairstylist and the nail tech and the electrician, It's the same way a criminal could also be coming over, because all I am concerned about is that you're paying your money and you're willing to take the risk to be dropped off in a remote part of Trinidad and Tobago. So it's a threat to national security, because these people who may be criminals from where they come from, with a history and a background, has paid their way through.
Yes.
What happens? What happens when they land here? Right now, there are business people in Trinidad who wants a good mason or electrician or builder or straightener or mechanic, and understand that there's a labor pool within the Venezuelan migrants, and there are people who are spotting for them, human resource spotting, and getting these people to work for them at a cheaper rate. Now, that is something we'll have another conversation.
Yes, we'll have to have another conversation on that. Where the migrant in that migrant labor force, and I did, I had some discussion earlier on with at another time with economist Dr. Roger Hussein, and he was very much concerned about the migrant labor force, and what, how are we really managing and treating with that with those those groups that seem to find their way into across borders, as we are discussing border issues and border security. But certainly one has to do, I suppose, there'll be the need for a detailed study on our migrant population, and how we really manage. I know that there was an attempt previously to look at the Venezuelan who were coming in at that time. I suppose some people may say that they are still coming in, and having to manage that obviously is a specialty area, I imagine, because the movement of people, from time immemorial, Mr. Hero, has always been, and it will continue. So that maybe this needs a specialist particular area. And before even this discussion, you and I, we were talking about having that toolbox that can treat with these different shades and colors of border security issues.
Correct. And the first thing that comes to our conversation is capacity building. We have the capacity to treat with the Venezuelans that are coming over. And I'm thinking that when you go to points of entry, be it Cyprus or San Fernando or wherever they are authorized to come over by boat, the capacity is weakened there to treat with the large amount or the influx. And therefore we need to build that sort of capacity. But within building that capacity will be also what I'll call the installation of technology and utilization of resources, maximizing our resources so that we have proper registration, proper tracking devices, so that not so much that you want to track people, but you have an accountability to understand who is in country, what are their skill sets, where will they be staying, along those lines. But there is also the issue of corrosion that takes place, and to fast track it, because when you have limited capacity, things are speeded up. And
yes.
When you have that compromise of acceleration for speed rather than accuracy, there will be room for compromise.
Right.
And those are some of the challenges that we face.
It's interesting that you said that. I saw there was a statement, something I read just previously, where it talked about war, that amateurs, if I remember it correctly, amateurs. It talks about amateurs are concerned about fighting, and people who are in terms of people at a different level, at a higher level, are more concerned about logistics.
Exactly. So there are different layers and tiers. For instance, the logistics comes with the strategy of war. The fighting comes with the tactics of war. Very, very important, because as you build your strategy with your logistics and you move around and you theater your various assaults or defenses, you also have to understand your capacity at the tactical level. So if you were to think along those same lines, we have to examine what is our capacity in country to treat with it. And that brings us to border management. Border management is not just border patrol. Border patrol is a tactic. Border management is a strategy, and it should involve immigration, customs, our land forces, our intelligence forces, land and airports, and also utilizing a combined synergized effort to treat with border management, because defending your borders also involves defending your critical infrastructure that is outside there in the Gulf and the East Coast and the South Coast and our North Coast.
Yes.
So border management is also protection of your critical infrastructure outside of your shorelines. It is pushing back and preventing against criminal activity. And a big one that exists outside there that falls into border patrol but involves the strategy of border management is piracy. Serious threat to our fisher folk,
Yes.
serious to property, and it is existing. Why? Because there is a market. People are robbing people outside there. There are kidnappings, there are snatch and releases taking place. People are being held in Venezuela. Venezuelans are being held here in Trinidad. It's a serious situation. What is involved in all of that, again, is transnational
organized crime.
Before we got to the conversation just now, I was sharing where a businessman who wants a good mason or construction or an engineer or whatever knows to a spotter who to check. The criminal knows to a spotter where the other criminals, the migrant criminals, are. And what we have to be cautious of is sooner or later, if not happening already, we'll see a cross-fertilization of the Latin American criminal and our local gangster criminal, and a different type of individual is going to start surfacing. Different type of tradecraft, different type of issues in robberies and how homicides are committed. Those are things that must be on the front burner of our law enforcement strategists, those who are making decisions. And be very proactive in your methodology in treating with crime reduction and removing or reducing that element of fear, which was the subject of our conversation when we began.
Yes, and again, another concerning area there, and this is the Citizens Community Forum. I'm Stephen Cummings. Our topic: border security, creating a framework for safer Trinidad and Tobago. I have with me Mr. Garvin Hira, former head of the NOC, Trinidad and Tobago, and Homeland Security and Safe City expert. Mr. Hira, seeing that economic prosperity relies on the free movement of goods and services, people throughout the region, and we do have an arrangement whereby, we can talk about the free trade, policy and that interconnectivity with Trinidad and Tobago and the rest of the Caribbean. One wonders, how do governments really maintain the security that they need while encouraging, trade and livelihoods? Because I imagine it's a delicate balance. How is that something that you believe that we can really have as I wouldn't want to say watertight, but be able to have the systems to avoid some of the infiltration that we've been seeing? And we talked earlier on about the proliferation of weapons, but at the same time there's a legitimate trade of the movement of goods and services among the Caribbean islands, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, Guyana, wherever. How do we get to that point to really strike that balance?
Of course, there's an existing trade for the small and micro enterprises. We understand that throughout the Caribbean. It's a back and forth, right? There's a corridor, there's a highway, maritime highway for ships to come in with produce and vice versa. We buy from you. So there's that CARICOM camaraderie. But you see what has happened, and I'm thankful that you asked the question. Sometimes we get so myopic and we focus really only on the business trade aspect.
And that's what I was getting to, yes. But go ahead, I would allow you to develop that point, yes.
Produce can come in, we can purchase, and so we can come to Trinidad, we can sell our produce, we can purchase, we can buy stuff here in Trinidad when we are leaving. But the encouragement and that semblance of safety and security also has to be sent. The imaging, our brand management of Trinidad and Tobago has to be a big one, and security plays an integral role. We see the same mistake being made in the corporate system, where when we stay about setting up our infrastructure, setting up all of our systems integration to treat with our business and our corporate enterprises, and we outsource security because all we see security is man by gate, lifting a barrier and managing a car park or monitoring some cameras. We tend to downplay the what I'll call the existence of security. Nobody decides they want to put security on the table at the strategic level to make decisions with the corporate secretaries and the general managers and the senior decision makers. Nobody thinks that there's a room or chair on the table for security. Security is an outsourced activity that security agencies can be paid for and contracted to put a man by the gate, or to fix entrance and egress, or to put SWAT cards or camera systems or change a fencing. That's where they keep security. Security is a strategic role player in the existence of business continuity. And if we were to go back to the conversation to talk about the free trade within the islands, we have to pay specific attention to what is the messaging concerning security for Trinidad and Tobago. If I have a business place, Stephen,
Yes.
I want customers to come to me. I want to ensure I have a safe car park. I want to ensure there's lighting. I want to ensure there's security. I want to ensure that you feel safe when you come in, you're met, you're greeted, and you come into the business, you conduct your business, and you feel safe. And we give you a comfort. So if you have to come into to Trinidad to conduct business, you have to feel safe. And we have to pay attention. What is the message being sent concerning Trinidad and Tobago outside there? Is it somewhere people are being raped or burglars or being shot and killed? Is it mass shooting? You can't go to a restaurant. You can't conduct business openly. You might be robbed. You might be followed from the bank. Is it that? For instance, that we are finding barrels with guns and ammunition, high-powered weapons? Is it that we are under a blanket of corruption and a lot of issues are taking place at high-level offices? Is it that there is a situation with law enforcement, a situation with the defense force? Is the Coast Guard under review? What is the message that is being sent concerning our security? And we cannot downplay that with good PR and photo ops. We have to start paying attention to the in-country security brand management so that we can build a sort of pillar, a foundation, a cornerstone of safe and secure. So that if I intend to continue to do business with this country, I must be assured that the messaging sends a semblance of hope, safety, and security. And I don't think we've accomplished that objective.
All right. So again, we're still getting there. Unfortunately, we haven't, as you said, we're still working towards that specific goal. But I'm also thinking, and we have to go to a short break in a while. But before we go to the break, Mr. Hira, we do have some very tense, issues between Europe, in Europe, between Russia and Ukraine. The Ukraine, Europe, very, very an area, hotbed, out there, and one wonders, when you look at Trinidad and Tobago, I want to ask the question, from your viewpoint, how concerned should Trinidad and Tobago be for its own border security and safety in light of the Russia-Ukraine war? I mean, we know about the economic side of it, in terms of maybe supply and demand, where goods are concerned, but certainly I'm wondering if you have any perspective where that is concerned, and knowing what is happening out there. I mean, when you look at Ukraine, an entire region, has actually gone to war.
Are we going to do that question now, or when we come back after?
We would deal with that question when we come back. And we just want to remind our listeners that this is the Citizens Community Forum. I'm Stephen Cummings, and we are talking border security. I have with me Mr. Garvin Hira, and former of the NOC, and also an expert in security matters. We also a safe city expert. And of course, we will continue the discussion on the Citizens Community Forum when we come back. Be part of the Citizens Community Forum, a place where we bring to light and discuss critical community, social and national issues, discussions on health, leadership, governance, crime, education and social justice. Do you feel that there is merit, Mr. Nanku, in that view that there is some apparent conspiracy against trade unions? I might be putting you on the spot, but
no. As I said, I'm a trade unionist. I came from the bowels of the trade union movement, so I speak openly with the guys. No, Stephen, I would not use a strong word as conspiracy. I would say that some of the matters that are before us, there is validity in it. Okay, outstanding wage negotiations.
We are in a new space, a new way where it's not the hard and fast, I am the boss, or I am the employee and have my right. There is need for that rapport together now. We have to mature to that new level.
It does
in
not
resolving
always,
workplace issues.
It does not always have to be adversarial.
I believe that we were not able to persuade the court on a very clear fact. And the fact is that the minister and his agents and servants, Litco and contractors, have been conducting work at many points along the David to Mondesir interchange, particularly the Faizabad to Mondesir area. And this was not the view of the court. I think that the court erred in not fully looking at the facts before it, and we shall be bringing that specific matter when we do appeal.
Every Wednesday, 8 to 9 p.m., the Citizens Community Forum. Your host, Stephen Cummings.
And welcome back to the Citizens Community Forum. I'm Stephen Cummings. This evening we are talking border security, creating a framework for safer Trinidad and Tobago. I have with me Mr. Gavin Hira, former head of the National Operations Center, Director in Trinidad and Tobago, and of course Homeland Security and a Safe City expert. Mr. Hira, welcome back. And before we went to the break, I was looking at the tension that continues to marvel a lot of us. You know, we've been watching, you know, the news and listening and hearing so much out there. The war continues between Russia and Ukraine. In terms of border security, how concerned should Trinidad and Tobago be in your view?
Well, as I told you earlier, Stephen is a strategist, and one who have joined teams and have sat at that level. You have to be looking outwardly to ensure that you can implement contingencies to treat with issues internally. And we are still in we were in fact in a world war, and then had to start getting the news of the Ukraine-Russia issue. And I'm claiming it to be a world war, which was COVID-19, and that started in Wuhan, China. And there was a time when we said, that's outside there. That is in China. And
it's not going to come home, yes.
You know, we are still, God has still the Trinidad passport, and that kind of stuff. We could deal with it here, that's right, that's outside there. And within the flick of a finger, we saw where something way outside there made its way into Trinidad and threw us in a tailspin. We saw failure, we saw mistakes, we saw lessons learned, we saw control, we saw command, we saw damage control, bringing the thing back into some order. And we are thankful today that we can have the good news of probably limiting restrictions. It took us a long time to get where we were. You know, in comparison to some other countries, they are still on the battlefield. You know, we are thankful that we can be at the level of, you know, putting things in place. So therefore, as a strategist, I am hoping, I'm advocating that somewhere in a room are a team of security experts drawn and pulled together probably by the decision makers who are strategizing contingencies and exploring what ifs.
The what ifs, yes. Go ahead.
By being proactive and putting things in place should that thing get into our hemisphere. Because it's not even going to wake up in the morning and see fighters overhead or destroyers in our waters. But we have to understand that some of the key world players are speaking. We have to also understand that there are support bases to Russia and to the West within our geographics.
The CARICOM region, yes.
Exactly. So a proper geopolitical analysis needs to be done meticulously that can address contingencies, proactive thinking, and explore what ifs. What is our capacity building? What are our resources? What are some of the joint? Was CARICOM meeting on this? Has there a meeting, has a meeting been held amongst our CARICOM heads or maybe our CARICOM national security decision makers regarding what ifs and contingencies as a region? Because if the situation goes in another direction and the support to Russia, it is within our space, or the or to the west, which is within our space, declares the Caribbean as a conflict zone, for instance, based on what is taking place, that is a whole different story. And when you are declared a conflict zone based on an issue regarding war, there's a whole change into how you do business. And there's a whole change that can affect basically your geo-economy, your geopolitical, and your geosocial. And therefore, we have to be very ready to treat with that. Mr. Hira, you see, that kind of talk, that ain't gonna happen. I don't know why you're going on that road. You're putting scare into people. You might bring fear. That, you know, we in Trinidad and that. We live in a global village. That is a global issue. We should be proactively contingency-led and what-if thinking planning to ensure that we have buttons to press should that thing affect or reach to a level where it now affects the hemisphere or our CARICOM region. And the first trigger that will lead that way is this region, this hemisphere, an area, a space being declared a conflict zone. And if that happens, guys, conflict zone expands. And if those concentric circles expand, it may just very well involve our territorial waters. It may involve our airspace. It may involve the supply chain. And that's why they're geopolitical, geo-economical, and geosocial. So that is my take on this. This is not something to go to sleep on and feel that it's not going to happen. This is something to go to sleep on thinking, what will we do?
Yes. Right. So again, we're talking about the what ifs, and I remember we also had a similar discussion on a previous occasion that we should really be forward thinking. And you rightly said that there should be a group of people in a room somewhere, you know, a think tank, you know, thinking about these, strategizing about these things, because once something like this gets into our regional space, certainly Trinidad and Tobago, you know, will be impacted in some way. And I mean, even now there are concerns about supply and demand where goods are concerned, where wheat is concerned, coming from the two of the largest, you know, producers of grain. So certainly, and you know, it takes me back to Mr. Hira, to one of the I saw you did one of your recommendations. I happened to get hold of it, where you talked about adopting a project governance approach to Ministry of National Security, and the start of holding people responsible for example, budgets, tasks, etc.
It's the platform of accountability. You see, we have to take, and I'm saying that we have to consider, I can't say we have to take that like giving an instruction. We have to consider taking now a project governance approach, where if I am going to allocate X amount of money towards a system, an agency, an office, or a unit, or whatever, the expectation of you accomplishing certain objectives, then I am going to set timelines. And with those timelines, I'm going to set clearly defined objectives along those timelines. And you are going to be held accountable with the money that you have and the resources that you have to achieve those objectives in those timelines. And if you fail to achieve those objectives, then you become accountable. You become responsible for some of the deficiencies. And if you cannot provide a proper explanation or some sort of visual phase development to the project, then you are going to have to face an exit strategy, and we will do the remove and replace. Because in the corporate system, heads roll when you don't meet your deadlines. Heads roll when you don't achieve your objectives. Heads roll if you are held below your budgetary pitches. You know, when you pitch a certain way with the budget and you're expected to do certain things on your profit margins. And governance is not bringing a corporate sense into public sector. It is that sort of integration of a way we do business. You have to start running the ministry as a business so that people will feel comfortable that their taxpayers' money is being used efficiently towards these projects. That's what they are. They're projects. you demonstrate a need for money to achieve projects. A big chunk of that, of course, we know is recurring expenditure. We have to pay
Yes,
salaries.
wages and salaries. Yes.
So that we understand that, but another part of it is allocation towards the acquisition of assets for the utilization of new material, buildings, whatever. And if in those aspects you are asking for new money, more money, sorry, for new assets or whatever, what are those new assets going to be used for? We transfer that acquisition of new assets towards an achievement of an objective. We transfer the acquisition and the spending for these new assets or these new resources towards clearly defined objectives that are linked and aligned towards crime reduction, towards a safer and secure Trinidad and Tobago, and hold people accountable. We have to move from the level of transferring and tap on the wrist and letters and okay, we understand. And every rotation of our annual our fiscal year, every rotation, there is an unanswerable section of where did the money go.
Right, and I know, and I know.
You have to start answering these questions.
I did pose that question, to you, Mr. Hira, on a previous occasion where national security is concerned, and in terms of the budgetary allocation, we've seen some huge chunks, going towards national security, and one is, I suppose, is asking the question as to, as you rightly said, where the money has gone, but certainly, again, looking at this business of accountability, and before I continue, I just want to remind our listeners that this is the Citizens Community Forum. I'm Stephen Cummings. The topic, border security, creating a framework for a safer Trinidad and Tobago. I have with me Mr. Gavin Hira, former head of the NOC and Trinidad and Tobago and the Homeland Security and Safe City expert. Mr. Hira, accountability. I have seen in other countries what some people may describe as developed countries, where sometimes, when you look at it, people resign, heads of security resign, sometimes on meager, issues. I want to put it that way, in terms of meager issues. And in looking at it in the sense that let's say you may have an operational failure. I saw where I think it was in the UK, where the head of the police decided to call it a day because of what that person felt was I suppose their inability to manage, and there are examples around the world where you can see where people they resign. But is that something that you believe will happen here in Trinidad and Tobago? As far as I can recall, I haven't really my recent memory known of anyone who would say, well, I resigned because of this operational failure.
Let me start answering that question by making a statement. The seat don't make the man makes the seat. And therefore, what we have to see is a sort of shift in our narrative. It's not about continuing what we did in the past. It is changing that narrative and shifting in our whole culture so that we can, internationalize the way we do business. And yes, on the drop of a pin, we've seen where senior heads of security have actually tendered their resignation. We haven't seen it here in country, we haven't really seen it in the region, but it has to be a new wave, a new change, and a new approach of how we are going to deal with how we adopt international best practices. Because that sends a message of humility and a message of professionalism. It takes a professional to make a decision like that, but what we see is that, we don't have systems in place that provides the invite for such a decision. And we have been able over the years to master putting plasters on gunshot wounds. And continue business as usual. So I don't want it to be mistaken on the point that I was making before regarding accountability. It was an old way of how we do business, people. We have to shift.
Yeah.
We have to start doing things differently. As we look at the new Trinidad and Tobago, as we look at the evolving of the entrepreneurial mindset of our thinkers and decision makers, we have to shift the narrative. So it's not what we did before. It's not how we ran the ministry before. What we are saying here is adopting new methodologies, changing our tradecraft so that the ministry would have shifted incrementally because the environment has shifted incrementally. And when you see those type of changes at the top, it filters down into all of the other state agencies in such a way, gets to the point of where a head, for instance, would tender his resignation because of an incident or situation or admittance that, you know what, I have not achieved my objectives, I haven't been able to deal with it, and I'm calling it a day.
But Mr. Hero, there's also the narrative of the blame game. You know, if you have, let's say, a head of a police service, you know, wherever that police service might be, there obviously, you know, would be a line minister or operational person, a senior person. When something happens on the lower end, usually that person is blamed, and you don't see the responsibility being taken at another level. I have not been, you know, I've not seen any such, you know, any such moves that are usually, you know, because we're talking about accountability, which should incorporate or be part of that whole systematic approach as well.
No, you're correct. And we've been hearing a lot of buzz in the atmosphere about reform on all various aspects. And maybe we need to look at a whole new reformation, a whole new reform for things like this to become, you know, more stringent, more direct. Because we're not seeing it. And we're not seeing what we are seeing, just as you said, we're seeing the blame game. We're seeing people being thrown under the bus. We don't see that sort of, you know, admittance. We're not seeing people's humility coming forward and admitting their vulnerabilities. The true leader admits vulnerabilities. So therefore, in that aspect of reform, we are the employers of the state, you know, Stephen, and all of our people listening here tonight. We have to start you know, making a clarion call for that change and that shift. And nobody is speaking in a political aspect. What we're talking here is the systems of how we do business.
And accountability, yes.
And the accountability for the furtherance and the betterment and the development of our sweet Trinidad and Tobago. Not for us, but for our children and our children's children. We have to set it right. That is why today, nobody ever thought that Trinidad and Tobago's roads would have to accommodate the amount of cars that we have. That's why the streets were narrow. And now we have to force ourselves to build 4- and 5-lane highways because we didn't have the vision as to where this thing was going.
All right. There weren't that group of people in a room strategizing and looking ahead. I hear you, Mr. Hero, in that regard. But, you know, there's another area I wanted to look at, and in terms of, you know, I did see, you know, some recommendations that you that you had for bettering the system and ensuring that we have a greater sense of security and a greater feel for you know, and we lessen that perception of fear. And you talked about utilizing an intel-driven concept of operations coupled with deep covert dynamics. And you know, can you just explain a little more what you mean by that?
So what I'm saying is that incorporating, aligning, working with all of the, like for instance, the National Operations Task Force, the new systems that have been looked at, we have to review our intelligence architecture. We have to see how we do business. And at one time, there was the Joint Intelligence Group where all of the intelligence agencies were meeting and sharing their intelligence to come up with an operational product that we can use at a national level. I am saying, I'm not sure if that is still taking place. If it is, we could probably review how that is being done. Intelligence has to be the driving factor. Intelligence is not information gathering on people. It's not mud smearing. It's not that. Intelligence really is the collection of information that goes through an intelligence cycle so that information is transformed into an intelligence product. And we have seen now the utilization and maximization of technology. Have we looked at utilizing technology? Those same CCTV systems, have we re-examined our national grid to also look at the analytics and what else can be provided through the CCTV system? License plate recognition, for instance, taking back the streets. The acting commissioner has made a strong move to take back the roads. You know, you're seeing the flashing blue lights at 5 a.m. That is good. But every single approach by law enforcement and the defense force must be intelligence-led. It must be getting information. We should see where our state agencies, public utilities, for instance, or the other areas, licensing office, some of the key areas must be a corridor, a portal where information can be pulled in order to gather intelligence. It has to be transformed into a national intelligence system that has systems integration, not because I'm involved in over-the-counter sales as a state agency, or I'm involved in the transactions as a state agency, that my systems cannot be utilized by national security to provide information that can help build an intelligence product. We have to move in that direction. We have to close in the circle to keep hold of our streets, keep hold of our zones, keep hold of persons of interest. Monitoring, for instance, has to be done with the support and the assistance of interministerial integration. So I am saying intelligence-led is not only the guy with the dark shades and standing on the corner who is the intelligence guy. No, it's not that. It's systems integration to provide information that can lead to an intelligence product. If I am Ministry of Support, Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Public Utilities, Ministry of Youth, for instance, Ministry of Energy, if I'm these ministries, I should be tasked also on what am I implementing that can lead to crime reduction. There should be multiple monthly meetings by ministries that are supporting a national crime reduction drive, fed by national security, chaired by national security. So we should have an interministerial contribution to crime reduction, because crime is everybody's business.
All right, Mr. Hira, we have to leave it there at the moment, and I want to thank you for taking the time to sit with us on the Citizens Community Forum for yet another time. And of course, you know, we will continue the discussion, but all the same, thank you again for your time coming in as we discuss this very, very important issue of border security. Thank you so much. Mr. Gavin Hira there, and we're talking border security, creating a framework for a safer Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, Mr. Hira, former head of the NOC, National Operations Center, and Homeland Security, and a safe city expert there talking with us. Not for the first time. We did have Mr. Hira on an earlier time on the Citizens Community Forum, but we thought that we should get him back in to have another look at our security apparatus, and just to discuss the issue of border security as it relates to Trinidad and Tobago. So that's it for this time, and of course I'm Stephen Cummings, and we will have another program for you on Wednesday next. See you then.
It was a famous poet who once said, "They came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." Words there from famous poet Martin Niemöller, 1892 to 1984.